She walked into a room where no one thought she belonged, soaked, pregnant, and ignored. One quiet question changed everything. What unfolded next shook the very walls of power, privilege, and prejudice. If you've ever wondered what happens when dignity refuses to back down, press play to dive in. She stood at the edge of a five-star restaurant soaked from the rain, 8 months pregnant, and staring down a room full of people who didn't see her as a person at all. Not yet. Not until one quiet question stopped the silverware midair and cracked open the polished veneer of privilege and power. Is there anything you're not going to finish? It wasn't a cry for pity. It wasn't a plea. It was a moment. One that was small and human, that would untangle an unseen world of injustice and awaken something in a man who believed he'd seen it all. But what do we do when quiet dignity enters where it was never supposed to be, equipped with truth, brains, and a kind of strength that can't be purchased? What do we do when systems we've trusted are shown for what they truly are? And who determines what stories are deserving of belief? This isn't merely about power or discrimination. It's about resilience, legacy, and the quiet genius some work so hard to suppress. So let's start not at the apex of victory, but at a table, a question, and a woman most had already given up on, because that is where everything began to shift. Is there anything left? The voice was gentle, but it rang through the upscale five-star restaurant like a clap of thunder. Heads swiveled. Forks hung suspended in mid-air. Conversations froze, and there, shivering from the rain and holding tightly onto her very pregnant belly, stood a young black woman with eyes brimming with quiet strength. Her name was Williams. She wasn't asking for much, just a pinch of kindness. But Victoria Ashford, a caustic socialite with a reputation for excess, didn't view it that way. How disgusting, she snapped, her voice carrying to the entire room. How do they even allow people like that in here? Kaches stood tall, even as the burden of each critical glare fell upon her shoulders. She confronted the man at the center, Table David Chun, a dominant CEO with a reputation for his $200 stakes and billion-dollar fortune. Composed, she inquired. "Excuse me, sir, is there something you're not going to eat?" The room was utterly silent. You could hear the faintest sound of a pin dropped. Even the waiters stopped dead in their tracks. David, fork and knife still grasped in hand, glanced up. He was a keen man, a man who'd constructed his business with laser intensity and unflappable intuition. Whatever about Kasha brought him to an abrupt standstill. She was young, just 25, but her eyes contained a sort of subdued wisdom, the sort that comes only from getting by more than your share of adversity. "How long since you ate last?" he asked. "3 days, sir." No drama, no excuses. No tears, just a simple, honest answer from someone who'd clearly been through more than her share. David set his silverware down. "Waiter," he called out, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Bring the lady another plate." That's when the whispers turned into outrage. "You can't be serious," Victoria hissed. "You're turning this into a circus." The restaurant manager stepped in, looking anxious. "Mr. Chun, maybe the lady would be more comfortable eating in the kitchen." David didn't even blink. "Sit down," he told ya, pulling out a chair beside him. "Right here." And Ketchup paused, not from fear, but from calculation. It wasn't what you'd expect from someone starving and 8 months pregnant. That pause made David even more curious. "Are you certain, sir?" she said softly. "I'm wet and dirty. You look beautiful," he replied. "What is your name?" "Keisha Williams." The waiter came back grudgingly with a new plate, but the whole room was now abuzz with judgment by then. Victoria could not remain silent. "This is absurd. You're encouraging this. What's next?" A queue of beggars at the door. David turned to her with a cold glare. "Beggars. She's a pregnant woman who asked for food, and she did it with more dignity than I've seen in this place all night." Kasha hesitantly, nearly graciously. It was a subdued elegance the way she used her knife and fork. She was obviously well brought up, like someone who didn't have to be rich or privileged to know about decency. David observed her fascinated. "Where'd you learn to eat like that?" he asked. "My grandmother," Kessa replied quietly. "She used to tell me dignity doesn't cost anything and you can't purchase it." That struck David like a gut punch. Years of pursuing success, and that one plain sentence reminded him of something he had lost in the process. Victoria sneered, but David was merely staring at Cha. At that moment, it was as if he could perceive something the rest of the room couldn't. It wasn't merely a hungry woman. There was something much better hidden beneath, and David did not know that this meeting, this unsung act of generosity, was going to lead to a door into a history that was going to turn his whole world around. Because Williams wasn't anybody. She was somebody whose tale would upset all the conclusions that whole room of high-end diners had ever drawn about value, about adversity, and about what it truly means to be strong. "Do you have a family?" David asked softly, observing how she held her ground in spite of all the gazes that fell upon her. I did, Shaw said. My grandmother died last year. She brought me up after my parents died when I was 12. Victoria's eyes rolled as she snorted. Oh, how sweet. Guess what? Next you'll tell me you were a doctor. Kusha raised her head from her plate, steady but unyielding. Not a doctor, she told him. Biomedical engineer, MIT, class of 2019. I'm a specialist in low-cost cardiac devices. And with that, the room came crashing down around her into stunned silence. The silence that followed was so dense you could have heard Victoria's pride shatter before her champagne glass did. MIT, she hacked, almost choking on her .300 glass of champagne. David leaned forward, his brows raised, obviously impressed. Where did you work? Advanced Med Systems, said Shah. 3 years working on medical technology for underserved populations, she answered in steady calm, her hand lying lightly across her swollen belly. So I was just about to sign off on a breakthrough pacemaker, something that would be 80% cheaper than existing models. David, piecing together the connections, nodded slowly and discovered you were pregnant. Kusha nodded curtly. I was technically fired due to Baiji restructuring, unofficially. Vice President Blake Morrison informed me point blank a black single mom didn't fit the company image they wanted to present to its conservative investors. Victoria snorted a dry, mocking laugh. Oh, please. As if a legitimate company would do something so transparent. Are we actually supposed to believe this tearjerker? This time when she looked at Kesha, something changed. The warmth in her eyes cooled to something tempered cold, like a scalpel. Victoria involuntarily recoiled. Miss Ashford, Kesha said, voice calm, could I inquire as to your academic background? Victoria appeared uncomfortable. That doesn't matter. I learned scientific methodology first before I concentrated on bioengineering. Kesha answered softly. One thing I learned, when a person disputes facts without examining the evidence, they're more afraid of what they'll discover. David observed silently in awe as Saja deflated Victoria's smugness without ever raising her voice. It was cool, composed genius Blake Morrison, David said slowly. I remember that name. His firm has government contracts, doesn't he? Exactly, said Cha. He has enough power to ensure I was blacklisted. No company in the field will even consider hiring me officially. They tell me I'm not a good fit, but there's always an excuse. David motioned gently, trying to connect it all, so that's why. I spent all of my money on legal costs to try to fight it, said Kasia. I lost my apartment, my savings, but not this. She stretched over to the side of her chair and carefully caressed a little waterproof pouch. That's when Victoria's composure broke. She got up so quickly, her champagne glass fell over and broke. David, are you seriously buying this act? She obviously fabricated all this to manipulate you. Just look at her. Do you really think that kind of person attended MIT? And just like that, the whole restaurant fell silent again. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. The tone, the condescending look, the words someone like her ringing in the room like a slap. David got up slowly. His voice was even, but it held an icy tone Victoria had never heard before. Complete that sentence, he said softly. Someone like what? Victoria's eyes narrowed. She'd gone too far and she knew it, but her pride forbade her to take a step backward. You know what I meant? She snapped back at him. People like her don't attend institutions like MIT. It's not prejudice, it's realism. David spouted the word like venom on his lips. Realism. Kasha observed the exchange without a flinch. In fact, she appeared to be viewing it the manner in which a scientist might view a reaction through a microscope, as if she had anticipated it and long ceased to be surprised by it. Mr. Chun, she said softly, thank you for dinner and your courtesy. But you don't need to stand up for me. I'm accustomed to this sort of thinking. You shouldn't, David asserted. And I won't. She stared at him, intrigued now. Why? Why do you care? You don't even know me. To you, I was just a pregnant woman begging for scraps. David hesitated. He hadn't actually considered it that way, but when he did, the response came quickly. Because I know what it's like to have been underestimated, he explained. Because I've been there too, cocked her head you. My parents were Chinese immigrants, he told her. They labored 16-hour days in a laundry to send me through school. When I began construction, people laughed, told me I didn't look the part, that I didn't know the market, called me names. She nodded slowly, and now my company constructs half the skyline of this city, David said with a soft smile. But I arrived here because one person believed in me when others did not. What if I told you, Kesha said, digging into her bag, that I can validate everything I just said? David shifted forward. How? She drew out a safeguarded tablet from the bag, wrapped up carefully and obviously well-maintained. This 3-year work of research that potentially revolutionizes cardiac medicine in poor communities is on this tablet, she told him. There are emails, design plans, internal memos, all evidence of systematic discrimination at one of the country's largest med tech firms. Victoria jeered, "Oh please, how convenient. A magic tablet, just in time for the moment you need it," but Kesha turned it on and held up the screen toward David. Noticed all at once code, diagrams, time, stamped email, medical, information, prototypes, and letters with universities. My God. David breathed. It's real. All of it. Kesha flipped off the screen. So the question is, what do you do when you're in possession of something that can save thousands of lives and validate a great injustice, but nobody cares to hear about it because of who you are? David gazed at the woman opposite him, exhausted, dripping wet, heavily pregnant, and yet steadfastly serene. She was the sort of mind to change the world and the sort of tale to break the comfortable illusions of the high and mighty surrounding her. And Victoria, still shaking her head, utterly oblivious that she now stood before one of the sharpest minds David Chun had ever met. Just then, Kesha's phone vibrated on the table. A message from an unknown number illuminated the screen. "Heard you're making some new friends. Be careful not to get in over your head. Some doors, when closed, are meant to stay that way. BM." She held out the phone toward David, allowing him to read it himself. His jaw clenched. "Blake Morrison," he muttered under his breath. "How in the world does he know you're here?" Your Hava didn't answer directly. Instead, she looked over at Victoria, who was glued to her phone. Fingers flying across the screen like she was launching a missile. "Connections," Kessa said simply. "People like Morrison always have eyes and ears where it counts." David took out his own phone and pecked away at it quickly. "I've just called my own lawyer, Marcus Webb. He handles corporate discrimination law." Kesha moved her head slowly. "Mr. Chun, I thank you, but I couldn't possibly accept charity." "It isn't charity," David said, looking at her. "It's an investment in justice." That was the last straw for Victoria. Injustice. She burst out, "David, you've gone crazy." She comes in here with a sob story, and now you're just giving her Victoria. David interrupted, his voice firm and authoritative. "You can go now." The entire restaurant fell silent once more. Victoria was motionless, shocked. You can't be serious." "I am." Red-faced and seething, she packed her belongings in stiff motions. "You'll regret it, David. When you discover what she truly is, you'll recall what I told you. Individuals such as her inevitably display their real nature." She turned and stormed out, heels clicking on marble. David faced us once more, all his. Concentration on her. "Forget her," he said. "Tell me about Morrison. What did he do to you?" For an instant, something flickered in the eyes of Kesha. Pain, yes, but also determination. "Mr. Chun," she spoke up softly but distinctly, "Morrison didn't merely fire me. He's been taking down the careers of any talented black employee who dared to climb too high. Anyone who challenged the old school clique." David leaned closer, shocked. "You have proof of 12 individual cases in the last 5 years, Kesha told him. "Engineers, PhD researchers discovering amazing things, all driven out, ignored, or silenced when they began to shine too brightly." David's anger simmered, growing in his chest. "And you wrote all this down?" Kesha looked at him, not with pride, but with something more, a calm, unwavering stillness. "For 3 years, I wasn't merely creating cardiac devices," she said. "I was gathering evidence. I recorded meetings, saved emails, stored doctored performance reviews. Kansick done me. All the denials, all the falsities, all the pay disparities, and stifled promotions." "Why?" David asked, barely above a whisper. "Because my grandmother used to tell me intelligence without justice is incomplete, and I witnessed what Morrison was doing. I knew he wasn't doing it to me alone." That's when David noticed her differently, not as a person who needed rescuing, but as one who had already fought back, one who had quietly amassed evidence for truth while being smothered by a system that was meant to bury it. And in each insult Morrison hurled at her, he hadn't crushed her. He'd honed her. Kesha wasn't just getting by, she was gearing up for something bigger than herself. 20 minutes passed before a well-dressed man in his mid-40s entered the restaurant. Marcus Webb, confident, unfazed. A Harvard-trained attorney who had never lost a case of corporate discrimination. As soon as he spotted Kesha, his demeanor changed. "You're Kesha Williams," he stated. Kesha bristled. "Do we know each other?" "Your work, I know," Marcus replied. "He read your study of cardiac engineering in preparation for a medical case. Your concepts on inexpensive heart devices were way too early." He took a seat next to them. "What went on at Advanced Med? That wasn't merely illegal, it was diabolical." David glanced between them. "Marcus, can you assist her?" I can do better than that, Marcus said. I can ensure Blake Morrison never hurts anyone again. He popped open his briefcase with practiced ease. You mentioned that you had evidence. If it's as solid as I believe it is, we're not just suing, we're bringing in the federal authorities. Keisha blinked. A federal investigation. Firms like Advanced Med receive hundreds of millions in government contracts, Marcus told me. If we can establish they've been discriminating, they lose everything, contracts, funding, everything. They can be hit with billion-dollar fines. Keisha's eyes sparkled, not with vengeance, but with a sense of justice long overdue. Billions, and that's just for starters, Marcus added. We can create a legal precedent that compels every firm in the industry to reassess how they treat people. He leaned in further. How much documentation do you actually have? Keisha tapped her tablet softly. 3 years worth, 12 cases, audio recordings, memos, emails in which Morrison instructs Peaker Sop to come up with technical grounds for terminating black employees, falsified performance reports, plagiarized presentation credits attributed to less qualified personnel. David rubbed his temples. My God. There's more, Keisha continued. Blocked promotions, wiped out positive feedback, altered credit on published work that could have saved lives. Marcus was writing down notes quickly. That's enough to bring down the entire company, he said. How long would it take to put it all together with what we have? Shah asked. 3 months to submit, 6 to complete. Just as it happened, Esha's phone vibrated again. Another message, another threat. I see you got some powerful friends. Too bad it won't help you. People like you always show their true face sooner or later. Them. Keisha gazed at the message for a moment, then coolly locked her phone. But now she was no longer alone, and the war she'd silently been planning years had officially started. Keisha's phone rang again, and this time, the message wasn't ambiguous. We recommend you accept your circumstances and fade away quietly before things get ugly. David read the lines, and his jaw set. He's upping the threats. Marcus, unruffled but plainly thinking, took out his phone and drafted a response. Mr. Morrison, this is Marcus Webb, attorney from S. Keisha Williams, any continued contact must be channeled through my office, and let this stand as your official notification regarding witness intimidation. The response came within seconds with smugness written all over. Marius Webb, the small lawyer who fancies himself among the big guns. Good luck establishing the delusions of an expectant street vendor. Some fights are simply too large for little people. Marcus arched an eyebrow and forced a cold, tight smile. Well, he said, that cost a lot. Written intimidation, flavored with racial paternalism, he added. He just gave us fuel. Keisha gazed at the two men to her right. For an instant, her poise faltered. Are you certain you understand what you're doing? She asked in a soft voice. Morrison has strong connections. He's the kind of man who can make your lives extremely, extremely unpleasant. David and Marcus exchanged a look, unity in their eyes. Keisha, David said, his voice steady. Guys like Morrison get away with this stuff because too many good people stay quiet. That stops here. Marcus nodded. And I've got something to confess too. It's no coincidence that I'm here today. I've been keeping an eye on Advanced Med for a while, waiting for someone to come forward with evidence like yours. Keisha frowned, confused. Why? Because my daughter, Jasmine. Marcus started as a chemical engineer. Brilliant. She was denied the job at Advanced Med she flat out deserved. They hired someone less qualified by a country mile. And Jasmine, she's never been the same since. His fists clenched. So when David called and told me a young black engineer had evidence against Advanced Med, I knew it had to be you. Keisha's eyes widened. So you came looking for me on purpose. We came for justice, David corrected softly. And he smiled. You have the keys to open every door Morrison believed he closed forever. Keisha breathed slowly, deeply. For the first time in months, she didn't feel so alone. My baby's coming in a month, she whispered. Perfect, Marcus replied with a grin. Morrison has to testify in court. You'll be holding his future in your arms. The symbolism will be devastating. That made David's wheels turn, Keisha. He said, leaning forward, that pacemaker design of yours, does it really work? She nodded. It works, and not just on paper. It could cut costs by 80% and help thousands in underserved areas. David's eyes sparkled. Then let's do more than topple Morrison. Let's show the world what he tried to hide. He picked up his phone. I've got contacts at Stanford Medical, at Johns Hopkins. Researchers who'd be dying to get their hands on your research. Esha stared at him, her voice trembling with emotion. Why are you doing this for me? Marcus spoke first. Because sometimes justice requires a little push. David continued, and because folks like Morrison are relying on our silence assisting you. I believe it's the best investment I ever made. As the three of them sat there thinking about what to do next, somewhere else in the city, Blake Morrison sat in his shiny corner office at Advanced Med, serene, self-assured, confident that he'd once again intimidated a nuisance. He was completely unaware that the lady he attempted to shame, the infamous pregnant beggar, was soon going to pull off the one thing he didn't anticipate, an outright revolution within the same industry he perceived to be under his control. What he didn't even notice was this: every intimidation tactic he hurled at Keisha just made her more resilient, and with supporters like David and Marcus on her side, his own condescension would soon be transformed into the most deadly tool against him. Because the fact is, underrating a woman who overcame racial prejudice, and actual hunger could very well be the biggest blunder of his entitled life. 6 weeks hence, Stanford University hummed with activity. The grand auditorium was full. Physicians, researchers, reporters, investors, all here for a landmark conference on innovation in low-cost medical technology. Blake Morrison in the front row, sitting loose, limbed himself, satisfied, invited as a guest expert from industry. He had no clue what was about to hit him. The moderator intervened. Our next speaker is Darkessa Williams, biomedical engineer and MIT graduate. She'll be presenting her revolutionary work on low-cost cardiac devices. Blake almost spat out his coffee. What? He panted, gesturing to the colleague sitting next to him. That woman's homeless. But Keisha strode onto the stage with quiet assurance, her newborn daughter held securely in her arms. It was a powerful picture, one that stunned the crowded room into silence and respect. A black woman, dignified and brilliant, ready to talk, not only about science, but about something so much larger. 4 months ago, Keisha started, her voice firm and steady. I was standing in a restaurant asking for scraps of food. Not because I was not smart, but because the corrupt system determined that my race and the fact that I am a single mother made me undeserving of accomplishment. Morrison shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Today, Keisha continued, I'm not just here to present a medical breakthrough that reduces the cost of pacemakers by 80%. I'm also here to present documentation proof that this breakthrough was nearly buried because of systemic racial discrimination. The massive screen behind her lit up with a bold slide. Discrimination at Advanced Med Systems, a case study. Morrison leaped to his feet, but Marcus was prepared. He stood up in the aisle, cutting off the exit, arms folded and smiling weakly. In 2020, Keisha declared forcefully, Vice President Blake Morrison advised me, and, I quote, women like you don't fit the image we want to project to serious investors. Perhaps you should consider more suitable work. The room went cold. Morrison sat down, white and frantic. Because at that time, it wasn't Keisha sharing her tale anymore. It was science. It was fact. It was justice. And it was going to rock the whole industry to its foundations. You could have heard a pin drop. The room silenced as Keisha clicked the remote, and Morrison's voice, smarmy, smug, unmistakable, echoed through the auditorium. Let's be realistic, Keisha. You're intelligent. But our investors are conservative. A black single mother in charge of our top project, that would be an issue. You get it. Gasps echoed through the room. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some covered their mouths in shock. Blake Morrison, hot red from collar to ears, sought a hiding place. But Keisha wasn't done. Not yet. That was not the only interview I recorded, she stated calmly, with a soft determination that even outrage never could. The next recording cued Morrison again, this time talking to the HR director. We have to let go of Williams and also this researcher Johnson. Too much diversity is creating problems in team dynamics. Come up with technical reasons. Be creative. That was when the room shifted. The whispers grew louder. They started pointing, whispering, shaking their heads. The mask was shed, and Morrison couldn't hide behind corporate speak any longer. 3 years, Isha explained, standing upright even as she rocked her newborn daughter gently. I documented 12 instances of racial discrimination at Advanced Med. She clicked on to the next slide, a list of names and cases. Morrison was familiar with each of them. Engineers, researchers, scientists, individuals whom he'd personally set aside in the interest of upholding proper standards. Consider Dr. Marcus Johnson, for instance, a Harvard-educated cardiology expert, terminated on paper for cultural incompatibility, but another tape revealed the true tale. Johnson is receiving too much focus. Physicians are expressly requesting to work with him. This cannot continue. Blake Morrison, who had once swaggered through boardrooms, now attempted to sneak out of the auditorium undetected. But by the door, holding a cell phone, was David Chun. Gogomenting every second, leaving early Blake. David taunted with a grin loud enough for all to hear. And there was Keisha's last card, 15 minutes ago. She told the room. Turning to the crowd, the offices of Advanced Med were stormed by federal agents with search and seizure warrants. The corporation is now under investigation for systemic discrimination, federal contract law violations, and scientific fraud. Ghost white is how people describe becoming suddenly as pale as a ghost. This is what happened to Morrison. His phone rang with calls and messages. Investors, executives, lawyers panicked. All he had worked for was melting away right before him. But what makes me most proud, Keisha said, gently bouncing her daughter in her arms, is that the research they tried to bury will begin saving lives next month in public hospitals, thanks to people who believe intelligence and compassion are colorblind. The audience rose to its feet as David took the microphone. My business, he declared, is subsidizing full production of cardiac devices. We project they'll save 500,000 lives annually, particularly in the very communities most frequently left behind. The applause was deafening. Morrison was utterly alone. All those around him had drifted away, as if being near him might taint their own reputations as well. That's when Marcus Webb approached, papers in hand. Blake Morrison, he said evenly, you are being federally prosecuted for racial discrimination, witness intimidation, and violations of the Civil Rights Act. Effective immediately, your assets are frozen pending investigation. Morrison stammered, still trying to spin it. This is persecution. I'm the victim here. This is a conspiracy. Spoke into the microphone. No, Mr. Morrison. Conspiracy is what you perpetrated against 12 talented professionals whose sole shortcoming was the color of their skin. What is going on now is justice. In a final desperate attempt, Morrison puffed out and snarled, you don't know who you are messing with. I have influential friends. David laughed aloud. Not anymore, you don't. Your powerful friends, they've all disowned you. You just lost your company more than $300 million in federal contracts, and as of now, your board of directors is sitting in session and voting to fire you. At precisely the same moment, Morrison's phone rang. He picked it up. It was his assistant, Mr. Morrison. The voice on the other end said flatly, the board has made its decision. You've been terminated for cause no severance. Your corporate account has been shut down. Your vehicle's been repossessed. Security is clearing out your office. Morrison slumped into the nearest chair, hollow-eyed. In the course of a few hours, he had lost it all, his career, his wealth, his reputation, and above all, the perception that he was invincible, all because he had underestimated the woman he once ridiculed. The woman he had called a beggar. Kasha turned away from the crowd, her daughter now sound asleep in her arms. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice full of both peace and power, I dedicate this research to every brilliant mind silenced by prejudice. Today, we've proven something. Important true excellence always finds a way. The standing ovation that followed shook the auditorium. As federal agents escorted Morrison out the back, red-faced and broken, offers were pouring in for Kasha, universities, foundations, and tech companies eager to work with her. And yet, as the cheers rang out around her, a greater question hung in the air. Could this single moment of justice have a ripple effect? Could it spark lasting change in a system that had silenced too many voices for too long? And how many more brilliant minds, silently suffering bias, biding their time against injustice, remained waiting for someone to believe in them? 2 years after, Jern Williams signed a worldwide deal that introduced her pacemaker technology to more than 40 nations, and it began the day she asked a simple question, is there anything left? The world was very different 2 years later. Keisha Williams, previously dismissed as nobody, now led a company worth more than $50 million. Her revolutionary pacemaker had saved over 200,000 lives, particularly in communities that had previously been neglected. Within her office at Stanford's Medical Innovation Center, Sophia, her 2-year-old daughter, toddled by with a toy stethoscope, her laughter echoing through the space. Only a few feet in the other direction, Shiva wrapped up partnerships with a global scale that would revolutionize the practice of cardiac medicine for eternity. Dr. Williams declared the World Health Organization representative, your work, your effect, it's quantifiable, and it's remarkable. The other side of town, though, was a very different story for Blake Morrison. 2 years since his dramatic tumble from grace, he strolled out of yet another unsuccessful job interview. Nobody wanted to touch his resume, not since those tapes, not since the suits, the influential pals he used to rely on. Benito vanished as soon as the tide of public opinion switched against him. Now he worked part-time telemarketing, struggling to make ends meet from his small apartment. His proud name no longer opened doors, it worked against him. His wife was gone, his kids didn't speak to him anymore. And ManceMed had ceased operations altogether, having to shell out $800 million in damages. On the same day, Shay received a call that made her weep. Dr. Williams, the voice asked, shaking with feeling, this is Jessica. I'm the black engineering student from MIT. Just wanted you to hear this. Because of your story, I won a full scholarship. I'm now developing new med tech for rural clinics. It wasn't the first call of this kind, not even the 10th. They came in on a regular basis now, young people who were motivated by her experience, set on overcoming the odds like she did. Not even Victoria Ashford was immune to repercussions, with her snobbish remarks going viral. She was ostracized from all the high-end social groups she dominated. Now, a name, which was once equated with money and power, was rendered a cautionary symbol of arrogance and bigotry. Even her relatives retreated. And as for Marcus Webb, he made the courtroom win into a movement. He started the National Center for Combating Corporate Discrimination, an organization that revolutionized the way companies hired. So within 2 years or so, they'd changed hundreds of companies and put 17 out of business that would not change. That evening, in her peaceful Palo Alto home, Tasha tucked tiny Sophia into bed. Beyond the window, California moonlight silvered the treetops. Worlds away from the shelter beds she used to share with strangers and beg for a second chance. On her desk was a new assignment: research on employing artificial intelligence to identify unconscious bias in hiring. Because to Krasia, the task was never more than showing herself off. It was about mending the system that attempted to destroy her. And that's what made her triumph so much greater than personal. It wasn't about annihilating Blake Morrison. It wasn't even about being rich. It was about showing the world that brilliance has no color, and that genuine intelligence can reside in any zip code, any family, and any neighborhood. Those very same people who sought to silence her, who discredited her as unfit or unworthy, only made their own fears transparent. They feared what she embodied: change, excellence not being tied to privilege, power without prejudice. But here's the actual heart of it. 2 years ago, she was a pregnant, starving woman standing before a stranger and saying, "Is there something left?" Today, she's nourishing hope to millions. Her story teaches us something powerful: that the darkest times, the rejections, the humiliations, the doors shut in your face can be the starting point for something amazing. If you're brave enough to keep moving forward, and the ultimate revenge, it's not to hurt the people who hurt you. It's to create something so great that they'll regret the rest of their lives they weren't a part of it. So if this video touched you, if it struck something deep in your chest, hit that subscribe button, because there are more stories like Shaz out there. And there are more folks like you willing to believe that no matter how many doors slam shut on you, there's always a window somewhere waiting for someone strong enough to open it.